Adam, as we take a look at Michigan and Oklahoma, Bryce Underwood, I thought, was free and easy, really good game against New Mexico, 251 yards. And then Coach Venable's defense for Oklahoma, I think, has been pretty good, especially at home. So how do you see that matchup? That's very intriguing, especially so early in the season.
Very intriguing. I think both quarterbacks in this matchup are fascinating. When you have Bryce Underwood on the Michigan side, the number one overall recruit, you're really the player brought in to change Michigan football and become the face of that program, even though he is a true freshman. And then you got John Mateer, who was the top transfer pickup at quarterback in this past offseason from Washington State, coming to Oklahoma along with his offensive coordinator, Ben Arbuckle. But you mentioned in Brent Venables in the defense. And while Oklahoma has not been what they hoped to be under Brent Venables overall, I think they showed some signs last year defensively of resembling, the units that he had for years at Clemson and even at Oklahoma as their defensive coordinator. So this is going to be a real challenge for Bryce Underwood, for the rest of that Michigan offense, a group that I still have significant questions about. Jonathan, are they good enough to support a young quarterback who's clearly talented, but still developing, and is going to be making his first road start? So I think this could be a low-scoring game, even though both offenses looked good last week just because of the talent level. I mean, if you were to say, take your two best units going into this game, it would probably be Michigan's defense and Oklahoma's defense over the two offenses. And so I'm really interested to see, though, how Bryce handles the moment. Does he make mistakes? Does he try to force things? Or does he just execute the game plan? How aggressive are they with him in terms of attacking downfield and doing things that maybe a quarterback who's a little bit older and more experienced, they wouldn't think twice about? But this is still a guy who's only making his second career appearance. He's still a very confident player. All the reports I've gotten from Michigan internally, that they really have loved the way he's approached this situation since he got there. A guy who grew up 25 minutes from campus, didn't originally commit to Michigan, but they made a decision as a program that, hey, we're going to get into the paying high school players a lot of money game, even if they hadn't done anything for us yet. And they made Bryce Underwood the face of what they wanted to do. And they flipped him from LSU, and here he is starting the game day, the showcase game of the week here at Oklahoma.
Yeah, Under the Hood is presented by Ankin Law, 3126 million for the great Howard Ankin. Put that number in your phone. You never know when you need Ankin Law, 3126 million on Under the Hood with Jonathan Hood. Could you please tell everybody about your column that you wrote on ESPN.com about giving up play calling? There's so many guys, Adam, they're just wedded to that playbook, and this is who they are. Like, they could be a head coach, but they still need that because that's who they are. But, boy, we've seen so many examples of this in the NFL and college where sometimes you just have to do what's best for the program. You got to give up that playbook. How difficult is that from the piece that you wrote?
Yeah, it's a real challenging thing because the large majority of head coaches, whether it's NFL or college, got their jobs by being play calling coordinators and by being great tacticians and creating schemes and having, in many cases, offensive coordinators who can come out of the gate and be up 14-0 in games because of the way that they've scripted. So I think what's interesting was talking to coaches that have done it both ways or gone back and forth. And Kenny Dillingham from Arizona State, talked to me about how he'd been a play caller at Oregon and elsewhere, and early at his time in Arizona State, but realized, hey, I'm best served by stepping back and letting my coordinator not just do the game plan, but call the plays, because I could interject a play that I think is going to work and may have worked if I'd prepared the offense all week. But in this case, he'd prepared the offense, and that those plays, at least the handful that he called last year, Kenny, didn't end up working. And then, you talk to coaches that are very much entrenched, Jeff Brom from Louisville, who played quarterback at a high level at that school and came up as a play caller. He looks at it like, hey, I get paid a lot of money because I can call plays and I can do it at a high level. And until I feel like that's hurting my team, I'm going to keep doing it that way. Same way with Lincoln Riley, who coached Caleb Williams at USC. He's the play caller. It's something that he assesses every offseason, but he still feels like that's how he can best help the team win. On the other end, there's coach like Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, who said it's almost arrogant to think that, you're not hurting your team because I know how much time it takes to create a game plan and then ultimately to call plays within the game. how are you possibly attending to everything else you can as a coach? And then you have the Ryan Day example. Ryan Day came up as a play caller, called plays really up until last season at Ohio State, and then he turns it over to Chip Kelly, and now he's turning it over to Brian Hartline because, hey, they won a national championship doing it the other way. And so it's really interesting just to get the different perspectives, but it's something that every head coach, at least ones who have called plays at a high level before they become head coaches, they have to weigh that decision. Do I keep it or do I give it up? And sometimes it's a week-to-week thing or an in-season thing. Sometimes it's something that's done after every season.
There's some times, I'm sure, as a Cub fan, you'd like for Craig Counsell to give up his play calling.
Well, certainly the lineup construction and some of the decisions, we can get into that. You probably saw my tweets. It's been such a weird year because they're a very good team. I mean, most Chicago fans will take a team that's projected to win more than 90 games, but it has been frustrating at times with some of those decisions.
I think you're fed up. I mean, it's nice for you to say what you just said there, but I can tell that you're not happy about what's going on. And by the way, like any athletic director, like any general manager, you will believe it when you see it when it comes to actually doing things. I think the Cub fan feels jilted at the altar that the trade deadline, that nothing really manifested as far as top level talent, and now this whole thing with Kyle Tucker. You never get a chance to talk about the Cubs. That's why I even broached this up, because I know that I see your tweets through the summer. There's a lot of frustration from the Rittenberg household about this ball club. That is for sure.
Well, and here's the thing: we don't have to get too much on a tangent because I know why I'm really here. But I will say that as a guy who's obviously been around Chicago your whole life, and in my case, my entire professional career, I feel like the Cubs epitomize some of the things that bother me about Chicago sports in this sense. They have such a loyal fan base. They are a national brand, and it doesn't always match up to how they do business in terms of building a winner. The trade deadline, as you mentioned, trying to go this heavy analytics developmental route instead of swinging big. And, we'll see what they do in this offseason with Kyle Tucker. And if it's not Kyle Tucker, who's it going to be? I always look at it this way. Even when fans are making the argument of, we have to be smart or we got to play for the future, it's not your money. Your money is going to sit in those seats and pay for marquee and do this and that. It's their money. And I want a crazy owner. I want an owner that will spend like crazy because he or she cares enough about winning and the fans. And I just don't know if that necessarily matches up to the brand that they have. So that's my rant. We don't have to keep talking about the Cubs, but as you know, my friend, I've got some thoughts there.
I know. Doesn't that feel better just to get that off? Just a little bit, just to get off their chest a little bit on a platform like this instead of your living room. Much better, isn't it?
Excellent. Let's do it again. I'll if you want to hit me up every week, I'll I mean, Cap and I are actually pretty. I mean, obviously you too, but I obviously see Cap's reactions, and I'm nodding along quite a lot as he's doing his recaps.
So, you know what I think? I know that, again, talking about piling on Arch Manning, a lot of piling on Bill Belichick and UNC because of how profile that game was. It was an isolated game. Everyone's watching. Michael Jordan and the stars were out. You know what I thought, Adam, after watching that game? I wasn't piling on Belichick. I know that he's a great NFL coach, probably the GOAT of the NFL. But I think that this time around, he's going to have to learn, just like the players have to learn, about college football. In that you think about some of his drafts, and they leave so few and far in between of guys that were real difference makers. He would rather go to the bottom shelf to put guys on his NFL roster than the top level guys. I just feel like this is going to be a difficult time for him to evaluate talent because he wasn't great at it on the NFL despite his success. I just wanted you to tell us whether or not you think that how difficult will this be for Bill, not just to win, but to evaluate talent and to be able to coach in college that way?
Well, I think the hard part is I do think eventually if he were to just say coach for 4 or 5 years and recruit players and develop players and sort of let them grow within his program, he could have success. I think the challenge is, he's already into his 70s, 73 years old. He's trying to build a team like a lot of new coaches are, which is primarily through the transfer portal. Because of revenue share, a lot of the really good players are remaining at their schools. So the portal pickups, there's some good ones. There's a lot of bad ones. And there's a lot of ones that just don't fit necessarily what you want to do. And then you're